You're listening to the Mega Talks podcast. Welcome to the rundown show for UFC229. So on today's episode, I'll be taking a review of 3 fights from the main card of UFC229, which will take place this Saturday, October 6, 2018. Looking at the card, looking at the prelims, there's a fight on there, Nick Lentz versus Gray Maynard. And a few years ago, that would be a main card fight, but they're stuck down on the prelims. Also, another interesting is Sergio Pettis versus Jussier Formiga. So the Pettis brothers are fighting on this card, so keep your eye on that one. One of the fights I'm going to start with here is the karate hottie Michelle Waterson versus Felice Herrig. They're nicknaming her the Pitbull. So let's take a look at Waterson's fights. And looking back, she's only won one of her last 3 fights. And she lost 2 fights, one to Rose Namajunas and one to Teacher Torres. Her only win was against Courtney Casey, which Herrig also has a win over. Waterson, she has obviously the stand-up with the karate, fused in with the Muay Thai. So looking over at Felice's record, she's won 3 of her last 4 fights. And her last victory came back in April of 2017, was a split decision over Carolina with an unpronounceable last name. I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. But I see the interesting matchup here. What's unique about these fighters is some of the matches that they've had in the past, they've been kind of outsized by their opponent because they're only fighting at 115 pounds. But fighting some of the larger fighters, they've seemed to have a few problems with. But I expect to see more stand-up. But if it goes to the ground, giving the edge to Felice. And for right now, I'll save my winning picks until the end of the episode. So let's move up to the next fight and take a look at Tony Ferguson versus Anthony Pettis. Both of them kind of coming off some injuries. They got some history of injuries. Ferguson's, he set out for like a year and had some surgery. That's been close to a year after I think it was a surgery on his knee. But he's put together 10 wins in a row. His only losses came from Michael Johnson back in 2012. That was his premier fight after the Ultimate Fighter. And he was one of my picks to win the Ultimate Fighter show. He's very good on the ground. He's a 10th Planet practitioner. No Bravo is going to be in his corner. Watch out for his Darce if he gets on the ground. I think it'd be a very interesting matchup to see them grapple with each other. Pettis is pretty inventive on the ground himself, and pretty good with the submissions from the bottom. But Pettis is 3 of his last 6 fights. He's only 50%. His recent victory came over Michael Chiesa, which they earned Performance of the Night. Before that, Pettis suffered a loss to Dustin Poirier, and I think that was another one was Fight of the Night, and that came back in November 2017. And I think that was the fight where Pettis actually displaced his rib, so he had to tap out and take a TKO loss. But we have 2 guys that are fantastic on the ground, 2 guys that are great standing. The stand-up, I'm going to give the edge to Pettis. Ferguson's real creative, but see the more flamboyant, technical striker going to Pettis. Now let's take a look at the main event. We got Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Conor's returning after almost 2 years of a layoff from MMA. We all know his last match was with Floyd Mayweather in the boxing ring, and he took a loss there. Taking a look at his MMA record on his last 5 fights, he's only won 4 of those. His only loss comes to Nate Diaz back in 2016, which that was he lost by submission. Khabib, we know, is undefeated in and out of the UFC, and he has a lot of submission victories. He has one knockout victory. So we're looking for the classic matchup of the grappler versus striker here. The interesting part is, what's McGregor's ways to win? Well, obviously knockout, TKO. Khabib, higher percentage victory of a submission, possibility of a TKO there also. So let's take a look at some scenarios, some path to victories, and things I've been thinking of for McGregor. His knockout over Eddie Alvarez. Eddie sat and traded with him, stood in the pocket, not a lot of movement. You watch McGregor and Max Holloway's fight. Max is a dynamic striker, didn't stand in front of him a whole lot and kept moving. Problem is, if you get a fighter that kind of comes straight at McGregor and just kind of sit still, they're opening themselves up and making themselves a target for that left hand of McGregor. If McGregor wants to set Khabib up, he needs to not only take the center of the cage, but keep his back off of the cage. And that means keeping Khabib on the outside. Khabib's going to be moving in and out, and side to side, trying to set up his takedowns and grab an angle while trying to press McGregor up against the cage, which is going to be hard for McGregor to negate that. I've seen some of his workouts. He's been setting up some knees, uppercuts, trying to catch Khabib on the way in, which is great. But if Khabib can use his hands to set up a low ankle pick or one of his favorite takedowns, I think he can execute his plan. But I see Khabib more rushing McGregor and keeping his hands up and weathering that storm to put McGregor on the cage. Because once he gets him there, I think it's downhill from there. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and pick Khabib by submission. We're not gonna say unanimous decision. I like to see a 5-round fight, but we know if Khabib can get it done in 2 or 3, he's more than likely gonna submit McGregor. So let's say I got Khabib winning by rear naked choke at the end of the 2nd round. Alright, so let's move on to Ferguson and Pettis. Just watching Tony Ferguson, he does move around a lot. I'm looking for Anthony to go out there and work the body and go downstairs, go upstairs, keep working it high and low with his striking. I don't see him being afraid to go to the ground with the guy. I actually see Ferguson, trying to execute a takedown or some kind of, fancy Imanari roll to get him down on the ground. I do think working Ferguson on the body and going up high and maybe finish him, dropping him with a kick or some strikes to get him on the ground, that we'll see Pettis take the TKO victory. But when you look at the guy's records in Ferguson's fights and how he lost in the past, that's going to be a big job for Pettis to do. And this is the one I'm kind of torn on, because I think if it goes to the ground, that Ferguson has the edge, not just physically, but I think he also has the mental edge once it gets to the ground. And Pettis is going to have to perform on the feet to convince himself that he's going to finish, because some of his last fights he's just not been 100% mentally in all those fights. So we'll see how that one goes. But I'm going to go with Ferguson to win the fight. I do see him sustaining and staying out of trouble and staying away from Pettis' strengths. And will we see fireworks in that match, or will we see a decision win? I'm going decision win with Ferguson. And now let's close with Watterson versus Herrig. So I know Watterson, decent on the ground, but she's had some submission losses. Herrig is kind of reinvented on the ground and has some wrestling under her belt, considering her training partners. Now I look for this match to start off on the feet. A lot of exchanges. And once they get comfortable standing, I see Herrig trying to take it to the ground in the second round. I see Herrig winning rounds 2 and 3 and taking a decision win. Whether it's split, unanimous, who knows how the judges are going to look at it. But I see her winning the second round and the third round. I see Watterson coming out and performing in the first round. We'll see whose cardio sustains and who wants it the most. And with that being said, I'm out of here, and I appreciate you guys listening to the rundown of UFC 229. Remember, you can catch episodes of Mega Talks on YouTube, iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, several different platforms you can listen to the podcast on. Make sure that you like and subscribe, share it with your friends, and if you get a chance, leave a review, so kind of boost us up in the rankings there. And I appreciate every one of you guys out there who listens and downloads. And I'll catch you on episode 22.